Hare Krishna and Gauranga. So welcome to another KC on the Go with myself, JD. I've been sitting on this little talk for about a week now. Fast-paced life, has put things aside. But luckily, by the Lord's mercy, I've and the wonders of technology, I've managed to keep it in my mind and keep it on my laptop, the slokas that I had been reading and I had been wanting to kind of highlight today. So this first part comes from the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. So I've been having a little bit of a read through of the Gita, and I just got through Prabhupada's introduction. And one thing to mention, which is not the class itself, but just it shows how many things there is packed into the packed into the introduction, is actually that introduction to the Bhagavad Gita was released as a little small book on its own right, like a 70 or 80 page small book, because there's that much in there just to understand and to unpack. So about maybe middle of the way through, Srila Prabhupada's saying what Sanatana dharma actually is. And basically, I'll read the quote and I'll give a little bit on it. So he says that, yet man professed to belong to a particular type of faith with reference to a particular time and circumstance, and thus claims to be a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or an adherent of any other sect. Such designations are non-Sanatana dharma. A Hindu may change his faith, become a Muslim, or a Muslim becomes a Hindu, and so on. But in all circumstances, the change of religious faith does not affect the eternal occupation of rendering service to others. So all these different groups, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, in all circumstances is a servant of someone. Thus, to profess a particular type of faith is not to profess one Sanatana dharma. The rendering of service is Sanatana dharma. Then he says, factually we are related to the Supreme Lord in service. He is the Supreme Enjoyer, and we are his servants. Now, one of the things that happens when we're out preaching on the street, and distributing books, doing Harinam, you get talking to people, and there's this kind of automatic disclaimer, or automatic disqualifier, where they say, just before you get started, I'm religious already. I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, or this thing, or sometimes it's kind of obvious, like depending on dress or something, you may right away stop a Muslim person, you can just tell, right, you obviously knew that when you've seen them, but you're thinking, anyway, well, we have to preach, we have to see with equal vision, so let's see what happens. They may just give a donation which will benefit them, or you may end up getting into a nice conversation and they may take a book. So, magical things happen all the time. But sometimes, they just hit out with a, nah, just to let you know before you even, I'm happy to talk, or I know you guys are all right, but nah, I'm a Christian, Now, from time to time, the bold preacher will just say, yeah, but one thing I need you to understand, our disclaimer, is that we're not talking about this religion, that religion, that religion. We're talking about eternal dharma, which is to be the servant of Krishna, to be the servant of the Supreme Person. Call him what you may, stick it under this label, that label, but ultimately speaking, we're talking about eternal process, eternal mood of the soul, It's to serve. And here you can see Srila Prabhupada has really nicely put it that none of these peoples in these groups are free from that propensity or nature to serve something or another, whether it's material service or spiritual service. We're pushed every day to perform some service for someone or for something, But the actual need to be fulfilled is to serve Krishna in a relationship with him. That's Sanatana dharma. There's little smaller dharmas where we say you're a dad, you're a mum, you're a son, you're a cousin, you're an uncle, whatever. You're a professional, you're a worker, you're a this thing, whatever. Those are different little types of dharmas. But the main thing, the eternal dharma, is that we're the servant of Krishna. So there's a big distinction there, and we have to and this is what Prabhupada's highlighting, we have to make that. And there's also a difference between the Supreme Person and the ordinary jiva, or the ordinary soul. We are connected, we are a part of, but we're still just a part. We're just playing a part in the bigger picture of the Lord's pastimes. And if we can actually, if we can fit in and find our place there, then that's when happiness actually happens. So Prabhupada then goes on to say, we cannot become happy otherwise. It is not possible to be happy independently. And he gives that famous example that he was talking about, how if you try to feed anything other than the stomach, then the body doesn't get nourished. You can't put the food into the hand, you can't put the food into the ear, the food into the knee, whatever it is. You can't put it into the belly directly. It has to go in through the mouth, be digested, and then the body feels nourished. So same with, this process of finding our actual eternal position in happiness is we have to follow the process directly, step by step. And one thing is as well, that, and I was looking at a couple other slokas, and it's amazing the consistency of Srila Prabhupada in his writings. That one devotee we were discussing a few months back, we were talking about how Srila Prabhupada wasn't like, he would, of course, he would certainly speak about his guru and say, by my guru's mercy and this thing, but he wasn't always saying, my Guru Maharaj said this, my Guru Maharaj said that. He was always saying, the Shastras say this, Srimad Bhagavatam says this, Bhagavad Gita says this, Chaitanya Charitamrita says this, or whatever, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he would always be quoting some scripture, or one of the acharyas, he was saying, Rupa Goswami said this, whatever, So he'd be speaking in that way. And that prevents that he's just, on the material platform of just glorifying or whatever, in that sense. Not that, of course, it's mundane to glorify your guru, but certainly it's not misdirected too much. He's always saying what Krishna says, what the scripture says, what the acharya says. He's never giving his own opinion in that sense. So I commented on this shloka from the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.37 many years ago now, which is famously known as the Samadhi shloka. Among all the Sankirtan devotees, this is known as the Samadhi verse. And because Srila Prabhupada says that by fully concentrating on distributing books for Krishna, one is fully absorbed in Krishna. This is Samadhi. So we know that famously in Buddhism, one of their kind of like their what you could say is their Atmanivedanam, one of their highest positions is to come to this platform of Samadhi where you're fully absorbed, ultimately, I guess, from their point of view, in nothingness, just peacefulness, just full absorption in your meditation of nothingness in that sense. And so you've reached the pinnacle, you're in there, But actually, for the devotee, this going out and doing service, giving yourself to the service that you do. Now, of course, especially Prabhupada does say book distribution. So not to take away from what Prabhupada says, but certainly there's no question that you can also achieve, your samadhi through, daily worship, food distribution, whatever it is, giving a class, you're fully absorbed. But the point is fully absorbed, And you can see that, actually, one can see that when you're going around on the street, especially, you're focusing on interacting nicely through the channel of the Lord's mercy. You're hoping, well, please let me be a conduit for your mercy. Please guide me to each individual person and let them take books and let them go away benefited. And you're absorbed, you're focusing, you're chanting like anything, you're praying to the acharyas for the mercy, Rupa Goswami, and you're praying to Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, and you're saying, please, Hare Krishna, please let me meet these nice people. You're staying in the zone at all times, That is full absorption, that's samadhi. But Srila Prabhupada also made another example and he also said that this was samadhi. And he made the two terms interchangeable. Krishna consciousness, samadhi, being the same thing. So this is another thing that lets you know what it is that we're really doing here. Again, I always kind of mention this kind of point a lot in these short talks, is that if we call ourselves devotees or we call ourselves Hare Krishnas or Krishna conscious or Bhaktas or whatever, we have to kind of understand what that actually means, It's like when people become movie stars, or when people become politicians, or when people become CEOs of a company or manager level workers, then they're meant to represent a far better version, and a far better front because they're no longer just what do you say, counted as in their own strength. They're also held accountable to represent that company. The company then becomes embarrassed if if they do something and so on, or the the government becomes embarrassed, whatever it is, if they fall or if they do something incorrect. There's a lot more involved there at stake. So when we're saying that we're Krishna conscious, that means we are fully absorbed. Yeah. So Prabhupada had mentioned, and this was in 124, chapter 1, verse 24, and he was saying how one of the name that Sanjaya said, he addressed Arjuna as Gudakeshana or Gudakesh. So he's saying that Arjuna has conquered sleep. Because of his friendship with Krishna, he's completely free from both sleep and ignorance. So materially, he's conquered over the material aspect of the body sleeping, and he's also spiritually conquered the mode of ignorance. So these two things. So as a great devotee, he couldn't forget Krishna for even a moment. So that absorption is Krishna consciousness or samadhi. So here you can see in two different books, two of Srila Prabhupada's most famous books, the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, he's making the same point. So this is amazing, this is completely two different topics, and the Prabhupada sticking to that same point. And they were written years apart. It's not like he wrote them kind of similar together and he thought, right, these kind of sound like they, he's making the same point at different parts. And so this is it. And you can see that the service is our eternal dharma, and that absorption in the service is samadhi. So to achieve that, such a high platform, just do simple service for Krishna. And ISKCON was built for that. Srila Prabhupada says famously in the Nectar of Instruction that this ISKCON movement is there to facilitate these processes of devotional service. It's there to facilitate the 6 loving exchanges, he says, That's the direct quote, 6 loving exchanges. So come to our ISKCON programs, our ISKCON temples, meet up with your, fellow devotees and your sanghas, and get absorbed, in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, ISKCON Guru Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.